Hello guys, my name is Alex Antonov. I'm 3D artist working in game industry currently. I'm mostly modeling and texturing stuff, and you can check my portfolio. I'm doing sculpts and stuff, and I wanted to start this mini tutorial series about mostly 3ds Max because it's my main tool. And the reason is I have a lot to share. Like, I've seen a lot of tutorials where people like they just use default stuff, like default settings, default setups, and they completely don't use customizable features of 3ds Max, so they kind of help to solidify this image of 3ds Max being a monstrosity of CG packages, like really hard to use and understand and stuff. So maybe I will be able to shadow that to show you how really fluid and fast the workflow can be if you just get used to some things inside it. And this first tutorial is kind of a test. I will show you numerous techniques that you can use to produce hard surface meshes inside 3ds Max, high poly meshes. And this ship, for example, is the parts use different techniques. Some use high poly turbo smooth. Some are not even smooth at all, and they just use this mid poly kind of one smooth technique, which I'm gonna explain to you right now. So let's start with just a box on which we're gonna show you exactly the couple of techniques. Like, I just gonna even copy it multiple times. So first we convert it to EditPoly, and then we apply Turbo Smooth. That's how most people work. They just apply Modifier on top of the model, and then they go up and down using Show and Result button, which my is Alt tilde, and they just go adding loops like this, and here's the results. Yeah. So pretty straightforward approach, but it has some limitations, of course, being the first that you always have to go up and down, and it's very tedious to click on this stuff unless you have set up properly the hotkeys for going up and down the modifier stack, which are called next and previous modifier. You can find them in customized case settings. They are really vital. I use Alt 1 and Alt 2 to traverse the stack. You can see it right now. I'm just going up and down, up and down. It is really vital for speed of modeling. Now there is a second technique, which is roughly the same. Whatever. I'll just copy this. But on the root model you don't use this, the Turbo Smooth. Instead, you create a reference to that model. See, a reference to that model, and you apply Turbo Smooth on reference, and this kind of leaves you seeing the end result without first wire mesh, which is really good, because without wire mesh you can actually see all the highlights and stuff that allows you to understand the shape. And this is also pretty useful. Like, for example, you can use it with symmetry. It is when you're working on something that requires you to use symmetry, you can just copy it as a reference, see reference, and then you can mirror it and put it back to the first piece and apply Turbo Smooth. And now you're working with symmetry, and you see no wireframe, which is really great. And that's not the only way. You can also, the third way, sorry, it's not a reference, it should be a copy. You can use this, use nurms subdivision. It is basically the same as using modifier, but it's built in editable poly. So you'd understand editable poly is basically also a modifier, despite that it is in the bottom. It is still it is still just like a modifier, but you can consider it as a tool. So it has built-in nurms of subdivision, which is really old method of the old because it's not really that optimized. It's not maintained anymore. Turbo Smooth completely replaced, and because of the speed, it works, and maybe other features I don't know about. But what it does is when you click it, this happens. It's basically the same as using Turbo Smooth, but it is built in. I have it on tilde, and you have this mini options menu right here, which is basically a copy of this, but when you're working with full screen, like in expert mode, you can simply use this menu if you want. here it goes. It is not as good. I can understand that it has differences with Turbo Smooth in terms of algorithm it uses, or maybe I'm wrong and it's just some illusion. Well, it has some limitations. Despite being really fast to set up and you don't have anything on top of EditPoly, you're always in EditPoly mode, it is really slow. Compared to Turbo Smooth, it is really slow. For example, this is the second subdivision level, and the first I don't see the cage at all. Oh, okay, here it is. Let's do 5 iterations and take a look at this. From the moment I press the key to the moment it displays the end result, it takes about 2 seconds for calculations. Here you go. It takes really long compared to Turbo Smooth to smooth the mesh. But if you're working with really low subdivision levels, just to fast see the end result, it's pretty perfect for that. It's really very convenient. Here you go. And it doesn't disable when you exit EditPoly mesh. Now there is also some trick you can do if you have a quad chamfer modifier. Now the thing about quad chamfer modifier in comparison to quad chamfer from last 3ds Max 2015 and 2016 is that quad chamfer as part of the tool EditPoly is not really it's not history independent. Basically it's linear in destructive workflow, just like everything basically almost everything in 3ds Max. It is really fast, but at the same time it leaves you with irreversibility of your actions. And on the contrary, quad chamfer modifier from Mario Silaki is actually history. It contains the history, so you can go backwards and disable it at any time or change the settings. So let's say we have this one here. If you're gonna smooth it with Turbo Smooth, what you're gonna get is the sausage, right? So because it doesn't have any support loops, it's just a bean and jelly bean. And what you do is you apply a quad chamfer modifier on the bottom and set its mode to smoothing groups. I won't go into details. Well, actually, it is really simple. You either select edges or you use a smoothing groups, which basically reads how your smoothing groups are set up on the mesh, and if on the edges of 2 smoothing groups, it creates a loop. This is how it looks. You can see these faces were extruded, that's why they don't have any smoothing groups. Probably just this one has because it was here. And these have, so on the edges you create those chamfers, which are quad chamfers, as you can see here, no triangles. So if I just set up smoothing groups using auto smooth, you can see the result here, and then I turbo smooth it and you get your shape. It's not perfect, of course, because of this, but again, it is easily fixable because it doesn't have, it contains the history. So it's like if I clear it and just go like this, you see the result is really good and you can do amazing stuff with it. It's not that perfect because it requires you to tinker around with smoothing groups or select edges, which is a pain on a hard model. But at the same time, it allows you to extremely quickly and indestructibly create this really beautiful stuff, which probably is not that easy to maintain after you create it with traditional methods using linear workflow. By linear workflow, you know what I mean, right? Not this gamma 2 and 2. Okay, so, and the last technique is something I discovered pretty recently. Because I am a game modeler, it means that my techniques differ from traditional one pretty heavily depending on anything, on engine I use, on requirements of the game, or on platform, and etc, etc. And I developed this, I realized this thing that let's go into this. We create 2 models, which are not exactly models right now. Oh, yeah, that's going to be annoying. Well, whatever. Let's go into new mesh. And let's say we're creating something pretty complex. So we have this, whatever it is. We just don't know what it is. Okay, it is some I don't know, some structure, whatever. And of course it has to be something smooth on top with turbo smooth or whatever. And we can see this result if you use nurms. So this is it. And the thing is that current engines use basically mid-poly models right from editors. It means that a lot of models bypass the stage where you have to create high poly and bake it onto low poly by creating straight mid-poly models. What does that mean is that you don't have a normal map on top of it, you just export it as it is into, for example, Unreal Engine or CryEngine. They both are able to process shit tons of polygons at second, like amazing amount of polygons. They just speed it out, they don't care because of how they are built. They're really highly optimized for polygons, and so GPUs are. So this technique of mid-poly modeling is getting a lot more use in the industry. So to work with it, you basically usually go with full smoothing. You fully smooth model, if you can call this smoothing. But the thing is, this is not really smoothing, this is just using one smooth group for the whole model, completely. The whole model uses one smoothing group, it is not like by 30 angle, it's just one. And this basically shows you the end result of your model. Yes, if you were to smooth the model, you would see roughly the same shading and same problems everywhere. So let's say you don't have this turbo smooth on top. Yeah, I'll use nurms. Wait a second. You see this part, it has some problems. It has a shading problem, shading errors. You're gonna fix it by adding more loops and it's gonna look better. Okay, you see this part? It has some errors because it shades cylindrically despite being a pretty straight angle. So you add a loop here and you see it's fixed. And the same will happen in a hard poly mesh when you smooth it. You're gonna see the same result, it worked. So basically just using one smoothing group for the whole model is equals to you previewing the end result of your smoothing. It kinda allows you to see and understand the shape. A lot of parts that are going for the ship that I'm working on right now, I'm gonna utilize this approach, and they're gonna have exported parts right away. Like this one, for example. As you can see, it is just simple shape with some support loops and one smoothing groups. It doesn't have any turbo smooth on top, but just a bit fur, and you see it's really good looking. Like it has some normal map maybe on top or something. It looks smooth, but it's not. It's just using one smoothing group, and it works perfectly. And this part, look at this, it is really like optimized polygonal mesh, and it's not enough, it should be like this. No, yeah, so if you're cutting on some really unimportant parts, like the main wing, for example, you can use high poly counts on very important part like this, for example. This is sexy, yeah. This, for example, will be exported straightforward into the engine. despite it will not use any normal map. Maybe for materials will have a normal map, like scratches and stuff, but not the mesh itself. It doesn't need that. It is satisfactory to just export it like it is, and it will work pretty well. So yeah, this is the end. Basically, I shared some stuff that I know. I want to see some response, what people think. Maybe I will continue on that, or maybe not. So, see ya guys, take care.